This dog amazed everyone by stopping people from removing his owner from life support. The reason will bring tears to your eyes. Dogs are known to be man's best friend, and this story is a powerful testament to that fact. Michael had dedicated his entire life to working as a police officer in the K9 unit. His responsibility in the force involved the training and handling of one of the police dogs. Among the various dog partners he had throughout his career, there was one German shepherd named Zeus, with whom he formed an extraordinary bond. When the time came for Michael to retire from the force, Zeus was still just a year old. However, Michael couldn't imagine parting ways with the dog. He approached his boss with a request, asking if there was any way he could bring Zeus along with him into retirement, as he regarded the dog as a beloved member of his family. Fortunately, his boss agreed and granted him permission to bring Zeus along into his retirement. Despite his powerful name, Zeus was actually a gentle and affectionate puppy. He preferred cuddling over rough play and enjoyed being in the company of his owner. Initially, Michael's wife and children had reservations about welcoming Zeus into their home. They were cautious because Zeus had been trained as a police dog and knew how to protect and attack if necessary. But Michael reassured them, explaining that he had personally trained Zeus and assured them that the dog would not pose any harm to their family. As the dog settled into his new home, the family quickly grew accustomed to his presence, and he soon became a beloved member of the household. But then something happened that completely changed Zeus's behavior. It was a couple of years after the dog was first brought home. He was roughly 3 years old and a fully mature adult dog at this time. One day started off like any other normal day. Zeus and Michael went on their morning run and then returned home for breakfast. As they approached the house, Michael noticed that the roof was in need of repair, as it appeared worn down. After finishing his breakfast, Michael gathered the necessary tools and started climbing onto the roof of the house to begin the repair work. At this moment, Zeus began to act very strange. The dog started barking, whining, and even attempting to cling to Michael's trouser leg, urging him to stay on the ground. Growing frustrated, Michael contacted his wife and requested her to take the dog inside the house since it was preventing him from working. Michael's wife followed his request and brought the dog inside the house. However, the dog resisted and tried to resist being taken inside the house. Not even 5 minutes later, the family heard a horrifying scream coming from the front garden. They all rushed out of the house in a panic, except for Zeus, who was locked in the kitchen. But what they found outside left them in shock. There in the grass in front of the garden lay Michael. He had fallen off the roof and hit his head on the ground. Michael's wife cried out to him, but he showed no response. While she was doing this, their children called 911 to request an ambulance. A short while later, Michael was rushed to the hospital where he received critical care and underwent extensive scans to assess the severity of his injuries. While the doctors discovered some scrapes and bruises, including a broken arm, their main concern was Michael's head. His wife informed the doctors that he had hit his head on the ground with significant force, and they shared concerns about potential irreparable damage. Unfortunately, their fears were soon confirmed. Michael slipped into a coma, and despite efforts, nothing seemed to bring him out of it. After some time at the hospital, Michael's family decided to bring him home and hire a nurse to provide care for him. They believed that being in a familiar environment might increase the chances of him waking up again. Once Michael was back home, Zeus, who had been crying for days in his absence, rushed to be by his side. The loyal dog settled at the end of Michael's bed and seldom left except for meals and bathroom breaks. 2 years went by and there were no signs of Michael waking up. The financial burden of his medical care and the constant presence of a nurse weighed heavily on his family, leaving them feeling desperate. However, the one steadfast companion throughout it all was Zeus, who never left Michael's side. During one of the doctor's visits to check on Michael, he observed something intriguing. After further examinations, the doctor came to the realization that although Michael couldn't express himself physically, he was still able to perceive his surroundings and feel what was happening. Upon this discovery, the doctors discussed with the family the possibility of euthanizing Michael as a means to end his suffering and bring closure to the family. Michael's wife was devastated by this new information and found herself at a loss for what to do. Michael was her soulmate, and they had envisioned a lifetime of love and togetherness. The thought of parting ways was heart-wrenching for his wife, as she had always imagined growing old with him by her side. However, she reluctantly accepted the grim reality and agreed with the doctor's suggestion of euthanasia, hoping it would bring an end to Michael's suffering. It was a deeply emotional and heartbreaking decision for her to make. The only hurdle they faced was that in order to proceed with the euthanasia, Michael needed to be transported to the hospital. This added another layer of emotional strain for his wife, knowing that it would be their final journey together. As the doctor assured Michael's wife about the arrangements, Zeus, the ever-attentive dog, sat in the corner observing the conversation with a keen interest. His perceptive eyes seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, and he quietly absorbed every word being spoken. As the paramedics began to enter Michael's room, Zeus, the loyal companion, sprang into action. He barked loudly and stood in front of his owner, blocking the paramedics' path. His protective instincts kicked in, and he made it clear that he would not allow them to take Michael away. He bared his teeth and clearly threatened to bite them if they tried to come any closer to the man. Terrified of the dog, the paramedics refused to enter the room until the dog was out of the way. Michael's daughter went into the room and forcefully took Zeus outside so he couldn't harm anyone. After removing the dog, the paramedics quickly placed Michael in the ambulance and rushed him to the hospital. As the vehicle drove off, Zeus started pulling on his leash with great force. His determination was so strong that the daughter felt compelled to release him. Once freed, the dog bolted down the street in pursuit of the ambulance. Seeing the dog so worked up, Michael's wife wondered if the dog was trying to tell her something important. The animal had become very upset before Michael's accident, and now it was showing the same behavior. Worried that she might have made a terrible mistake, she quickly got into her car and drove after the dog. When she arrived at the hospital, she noticed Zeus running into the building. The dog quickly followed his nose and located the room where Michael was. The dog rushed into the hospital room and saw a doctor about to administer the euthanizing drug to his owner. The dog quickly jumped on the doctor, pushing him down and making him drop the drug. The doctor screamed for help, terrified of the dog and wanting someone to remove him. Just as someone was about to remove the dog, they all heard a sound that made them freeze in their tracks. Michael's heart monitor began to accelerate, its beeping echoing through the room. Then, a faint, hoarse voice spoke up, pleading with them to leave the dog alone. With everyone frozen in astonishment, Zeus slowly backed away from the doctor and approached Michael's bedside, his tail wagging eagerly. As Michael's wife entered the room, a surge of emotions overwhelmed her when she realized that her husband was finally awake. She couldn't help but burst into tears of joy, her emotions overflowing at the sight of her husband finally awake. It felt like a true miracle to have him back. After the initial shock wore off, the doctor quickly stood up and checked the man to make sure he was okay. Meanwhile, Michael's wife called her children to share the wonderful news. After a few weeks, Michael was discharged from the hospital and able to return home. Once he arrived, Zeus was the first one to greet him, jumping and showering him with kisses. Michael chuckled and knelt down on the floor, embracing Zeus. He wrapped his arms tightly around Zeus, showering him with affection and gratitude. In that moment, Michael realized that if it weren't for his loyal dog, he might not have been there anymore. Pets have a special way of knowing what's best for us, as this touching story illustrates. By listening to our furry friends, we may find the guidance and love we need in unexpected ways. Share your thoughts on the story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for future amazing animal stories.